Well, good afternoon, everyone. I'm going to introduce myself. I'm Kent McDonald, and this reminds me of my days living at the Gale for 2 years, and then surviving that, and then living up on Hawthorne Street with Dr. Howard, you know, John Howard and his wife. And we would, my roommate and I, we would plan these wonderful events for people to come, and no one would ever show up. So I was a little worried if anyone's going to come today. So I thank you in the middle of the summer for coming. We are going to have a lot of time to get to know one another over the next several months. I was speaking with some media last week. Cindy and her team did a remarkable job of trying to get our voice into this market, but into the Halifax market, and I explained to them this 100 days of going out and speaking with people, and the 60 departments that we have here at St. FX, and just trying to listen about what's on people's minds. And the reporter said, well, that's what Richard did at Dalhousie, and it's actually something that people do at most universities when they come in and are new. And although I think I know St. FX, I don't really know it well, and I haven't looked behind the curtain. So this is going to allow me to do that. The big mistakes I've seen in my own research is when presidents think they know what to do and start to make decisions too early, and it can go downhill rather rapidly. So we're going to have an opportunity throughout the next several months. Everyone on this campus will get an opportunity to share their voice directly with myself. And is Dave, I know Dave, you're in here somewhere. Where's Dave Matty? Dave up here is my partner in crime on this, and we're going to go out and really try to do a good job of understanding what are our common aspirations, what have been some of the things on your mind, and yet, and I'll report back to you in November on that. That has always been my style. I am the last person who thinks they're the smartest person in the room. I can guarantee you that. And if any success I've had, it's learning. And this wasn't an innate thing. It was learning and stumbling over the years. Is the more you listen and cast your tent really wide, typically you have better results that way. And so we're going to do that. But at the same time, there's some things that I can't ignore. And there's some things that I think I want to share with you in terms of what's on my mind. The way I describe this is when I did my MBA at the Ottawa University, I had a wonderful economics professor. And yet at the same time, he and I were not exactly on the same page in terms of economics and principles and things. And it was about week 4 when I realized that he was from one school of thought. He actually did a lot of his studies at the School of Economics, London School of Economics, and that allowed me to frame at least what I was hearing from him in terms of the way I view the world from a macroeconomic point of view. And so early on, I've realized maybe it's important to take some time like we're doing today to allow you to at least understand, so who is this person, and how is it that he looks at the world, and what's his lens that he looks at certain things. So that's what I'm hoping to be able to do today, so that when you hear certain things, you can frame it as that aligns with the way I'm thinking of St. FX, and this doesn't, but at least I know what Kent's thinking about. So I'm also going to touch on what I think are some priorities or some themes. Look, there's going to be, most presidents at these great institutions come from scientific background, anthropological background, liberal education, etc. I come from a higher education background. It's my little niche of what makes me get up every morning and understand of an amazing environment in which we work. And I read a lot about it, and I don't have all the answers, but I have framed some things that I've seen over the years that are happening in higher ed. And I don't know what your position is on all of these things, but at least you'll get to see 5 of the things that I see emerging in higher ed today. How that applies to us, we're going to figure that out together. And I guarantee the one thing that will come out of this will be a St. X strategic plan. I have not worked in an environment without having really, really clear direction on what I need to put my focus on and where the budget needs to go. I like to describe a budget as simply a tool in order for you to carry out your strategic priorities. And then when people say, well, these are our priorities, what I like to respond in that regard is, show me where you spend your money, and I'll know those are your priorities. So we need to understand, or I need to understand, what is it that we aspire to be as an academic community, lay out a very clear strategic plan, and then lay out a plan on how are we going to put what are becoming even more scarce resources in order for us to get to where we collectively want to go. So that will be one outcome, I know, but there will be others that will undoubtedly emerge as we go along. So let me just go on a few things. We don't have a lot of time here today because we have a reception, I understand, at 4 o'clock. I promised to get you there, and I promise to open up this to allow you to ask any question or make any comment that you want. I may not have the answers, but we'll work our way through this. So, but at least in our short time together, particularly our environment, what I'd like you to give some thought to is just my view that great institutions don't become great by staying in safe harbors, that they have a culture and a working environment where you enable people to try new things, to venture out from the safety of being tied up at the dock and try some things. And sometimes it gets a bit rough along the way, but in my view, we are not going to be successful by me lobbying on your behalf with this government alone. We as a group, again as an academic community, we need to rethink about where we are today in 2014 and how are we going to secure more resources, grow at a higher rate, quite frankly, than we're growing right now. We cannot, in my observation, remain stable from an enrollment point of view the way this institution is funded. It is not, I'm going to use a business analogy, it's not a business any of us would want to be in, quite frankly, the way we're funded. We have tuition caps, we have government grant caps, and we're constrained in many ways, and yet our costs continue to rise. And it's not just St. X's costs. If you look at the HEPI, the Higher Education Price Index, similar to CPI, it's growing faster than our stream of revenues. That is not unsurmountable, though. There are many higher education institutions, one of which I've come from, that we've just delivered an $8 million surplus that has allowed us to go on and do things. Why? Not because of the president, but because the faculty and the staff were prepared to move out into deeper waters and try new things. So some of the things that certainly influence me in terms of who it is that you'll be working with on, I hope, on a daily basis. I've had 3 really important things that have occurred in my life. And we all have a past, and they all contribute to the way we view the world. The first one is where I've spent time as a student. So some has been in America, most of it's been in Canada. And some of the similarities, not so much Ottawa U, but certainly the other ones, including this one, is it seems to have realized that learning is an artificial construct that we put together. We create these things called classrooms, and we hope that through our teaching some level of learning occurs in there. And yet, my view is great learning occurs when our faculty and our students get out of these things called classrooms and allow our students to be able to be exposed in a different, deeper, richer way. And it could be through work integrated learning or co-op opportunities. It could be through service learning. And I've got a great friend at the University of Pennsylvania who spent time here, Matthew Hartley, around your helping early on around service learning. But this type of activity that occurs on a campus like this, from early on through the Anti-Knish movement, through the work of Cody and X Project, and realizing that what can happen in a student's life can be more powerful when we can expose them to real life things in a community. And my time here, more than any other place that I've spent as an undergraduate, my time here as an undergraduate has shaped my view of the world in that regard. That this is an institution that does that extremely well, and it's not common on many institutions, universities across Canada and the United States and around the world. That in too many of those places, they think that magically people come into classrooms, a professor teaches, and it's over. I've been influenced by what I would refer to as a seminal article by Barentag in the late 1990s that asked the question, do we exist? Does St. FX University exist for the purpose of instruction? Or does St. FX University exist for the purpose of learning? In my view, it exists for the purpose of learning. And when you can think like that, I think it liberates us in terms of how it is that we connect with our students and the magical things that can happen within a classroom, regardless of how you define it. So that's one way that I've been shaped as an academic leader, is my time here, particularly here, but even my time at Penn, where Benjamin Franklin cast his shadow long and hard over that institution, and they have made a deep commitment for 250 years in terms of experiential, hands-on, service learning, making a difference in your community. And so I'll end this one by saying this, that when I met with the government last week and our deputy minister, they have asked me the question about what type of impact is St. FX committing to have, not only at a national level, but on the local community that we serve. And I will get to know more about that when I'm here. But again, I keep forgetting it's more than 25 years since I've been here, but a long time ago that was certainly the case. And from what I've read in some of the work that many of our faculty are doing, that seems to be strongly a deep, rich commitment to our students. The second one is I have had the good fortune to have spent a lot of time outside Canada. Asia, the Middle East, Latin America, Africa. Only the east coast of Africa, but certainly starting to get a glimpse of the 50 countries and cultures there. What it has proven to me is a few things. Number one is the world wants what we have. I'm absolutely convinced of that. We have in our Cody Institute something that everyone knows in this room what Cody is, but I'm not exactly sure how we've totally integrated and used Cody to change the experience for the students here, to prepare them for a life after they leave St. FX. And more than just Cody, I've had long discussions about some of the work that we have been doing in Ontario to take out what we have learned here offshore. One, I think it provided faculty and staff wonderful opportunities to learn outside of Canada. Students, wonderful opportunities to learn. The more international students we had on campus, and we grew at 17%, they grew at 17% last year. I see great opportunities here for international enrollment, as long as our systems are in place to support those students, that we're not just harvesting international students, but we're actually finding ways to blend them in to the experience, not only for their benefit, but for our Canadian students as well. So, again, the work that I've done overseas, it convinces me that the democratization of higher education is the most powerful tool, or as Nelson Mandela said, the most powerful weapon that we can have to change the world. I deeply, deeply believe that. And that is one of the conversations that I would like to have with this campus, is how can we use 161 years, over 50 years of experience in that regard to make not only northeastern Nova Scotia a better place, but perhaps even the world a better place, more than what you've already been doing. And the final point on this influence or bias is there is nothing, I don't think, that a government should be focused on more than how they are investing in higher ed. And I know this province had a government that didn't quite believe that, at least through the actions of the cuts to higher education. But where most public services are consumers of tax dollars, higher education is an investment of tax dollars. And I see that as absolutely my responsibility to get the St. FX voice in front of who I think is a strong supporter in Minister Regan and this government, to say that the best thing that they can do for this province in its long-term economic and social prosperity is a recommitment to higher education. And again, that's based on what I've seen overseas. At the same time, you have countries around the world trying to catch us, and they're investing very, very significantly. My time in Kazakhstan 3 weeks ago proved that. Millions, hundreds of millions of dollars to try to get what we have. So that's another influencer. The last one is, quite frankly, where I'm from. Most of you probably realize that this is home for me, that Annikanish is a place that I have spent a lot of time, not only as a student, but from where my mother grew up. My grandparents built that old Gale Motel, had the first car dealership in this region, and it does feel like coming home. But let me just explain a conflict that I have. And the best way to do it is to try to describe what I refer to. I like this, A Tale of Two Cities. I'm not sure where I've heard it before, but it has a ring to it, I reckon. And so I'm going to keep it. So I lived in Ottawa, our nation's capital, for 25 years, and I know some of you have lived there as well. My hometown is New Glasgow, Nova Scotia. Every year when I read Money Sense magazine, one of the Rogers publications, one of them under the Maclean's envelope of companies, they list the top places in Canada to live. So the top city, consistently, is Ottawa. Sometimes it's Calgary and it moves back and forth, but it's up there at 1, 2, or 3. And so the mayor, Jim Watson, who I describe as a good friend of mine, stands up on that day and says, "See, we live in a great city." And then I turn 4 pages over, and there's 4 pages on this list, and I go down the list to 190th, the last place to live in Canada. And almost consistently, there it is, New Glasgow, Nova Scotia. And so that always brings a laugh, but I am conflicted with that, and I start asking myself as an educator, what's going on there? Because there was a time when New Glasgow was not the top place to live, or worst place to live, according to that publication in Canada. It had a vibrant fishing industry, mining industry, metal industry. It created the best train, rail cars. People from around the world were coming to Trenton Works to buy rail cars, pulp and paper, et cetera, et cetera. And yet today, you drive into New Glasgow and it has this beautiful, beautiful sign of flourish. And then after a while, I drove around recently, and this is what I see. So I leave this great national capital region with high employment rates, highly educated people, and I come back to New Glasgow. And so I start to think about that again as an educator. What's happening there? Here's what I'm convinced of. I'm convinced that the people in New Glasgow or Pictou County want their children to have every great life, good a life, as the people in Ottawa. I'm convinced that people in New Glasgow are every bit as smart as people in Ottawa. And I'm darn sure of this, that the people in New Glasgow work just as hard or more than the people of Ottawa. And so when I connect all of those dots together of where I've studied and where I've traveled internationally, and this paradox that is occurring between Ottawa and New Glasgow, the thing that I think that connects all of those, what appear to be separate items, is higher education. And it's why I've committed my life in the last 16, 17 years to higher ed. The same as I hope that when I go see a physician that they have read everything that they've possibly read to make sure I get healthier. When I go see a lawyer, as few times as possible, that they know everything that's happening in law. In my little world, I want to know everything that's going on in higher ed. Because if there's one vice or one weakness I have, and it's that I am an ultra-competitive person. And I'll be darned when I see either rankings, and I'm writing an article with another colleague, a chapter on rankings right now. But when I see rankings and see where we fit, or I hear different things, I want St. FX to be viewed as a preeminent undergraduate, however we define that, university in the country. Stop. Then just stop there and not have to frame it residential, etc. So we have some work to do. And yet the blessing that I have as your president is the foundation that we're going to build that on is extremely strong. Extremely strong. There's an international conference being held here right now that would attest to that, I think, that this is a great university and we have to think about where do we go next. So there's lots going on, and again, being aware of the time, let me just touch on a few. These are just some of the things that keep me up at night. A lot of people ask me, what is it that keeps me up at night? I'll come to this in a moment. Most presidents in the literature would say it's finances. That's actually not what keeps me up at night. Because is Andrew here? So Andrew, can you just stand up? Andrew is our new Vice President, Finance and Administration, and we're so pleased to have him here with 2 children who have gone to St. FX and extremely, extremely experienced. And so what I've said to Andrew is this: Andrew, presidents don't get fired because of curriculum issues. They get fired because they can't balance the budget. And so there's only one person who goes before me. And no, just no. No, we're going to get that thing solved. It's finances isn't actually what keeps me up. What keeps me up at night is asking questions, are we doing the right thing? In 2014, are we doing the right thing? And so these are just some of the things that you're reading about, from MOOCs and commercialization of research and competition and international, and the list goes on and on and on. There's a lot on our plate in terms of making this another successful for another many, many years. So let me just talk about Arne Duncan, the Secretary of Education in the States, really used this term a lot, that this is just our new normal. That I am convinced that this government will not have the ability to get us on their own, to get us out of the situation that we're in and prepare us for long-term success. That is our challenge, to figure that out. That is certainly the way I view as my challenge, to figure that out. So let me just share very quickly 5 things, that whole list, 5 things that have been on my mind recently, and what keeps me up at night. First of all, sorry, this slide here should set better context. The expectation for us as an academic community has never been as high as it is today. And it's coming at us from all kinds of sides, that students have an extremely high expectation. And here's the secret, in my view, of students. They just expect to have a great academic experience. That it's these other things that they've come to think in the 2014 student. And if you look at what's happening in other institutions, there's now universities having wars over who can build the highest climbing wall for their students. That's the truth. There are universities now thinking that they need to put in lazy rivers for their students. It's a different world that we find ourselves in, but it's a challenge for us to think about. I was in our food services talking to Kevin and some of the staff last week, and just the variety of foods that they expect from someone like me who prefers gluten-free to just the variety. It's a challenge that we need to be mindful of, and ensuring that these students have different kinds of services, and asking, well, do they actually need it or do they prefer it? But students, society has a high expectation. We're under the radar like never before, and I'm all for accountability and transparency. I think it's good as a publicly assisted institution for that to happen, and then government and industry as well. So some of the forces I think that we have to give some thought to is this student group that is changing rather dramatically. And there is no doubt in my mind that they are coming to us as we massify higher education and open our doors more widely. That is a good thing. I do believe it's a good thing. We are now giving a chance for young people, Aboriginals, students with disabilities, students with language difficulties, newcomers, an opportunity to participate. And I need to reconcile that I can't on one hand say that higher education is the greatest lever to change people's lives and not recognize that we need to realize that our student body itself is changing. But what that requires is the services. The definition of a student is no longer 18 to 24. And when people say, well, that group is in decline in Nova Scotia, and by the way, your next major market, our next major market of Ontario, is now in decline, so it's going to become more and more competitive. That doesn't mean that the world will come to an end. It means that we have to continue to redefine that market. 18 to 24 will be one, but a more mature market will be another. An international market will be another. Tim and I had a conversation this morning about identifying who are the students who have come to this institution in the last 10 years and are 10 credits or less short from graduating. Can we reach out to them and say, don't give up on that dream? We're going to package together a specific type of learning strategy to get you through. So the type of students that are coming here are different, and at the same time, I could show you literature going back to the late 1800s where faculty have said, if only these students were ready and willing to learn and better prepared, life would be so easier. That's not our case anymore. So what we have to do is I need to find a way to get more resources to our faculty to support them in an ever-increasing difficult job of making sure that they're successful in the classroom through more professional development and supports. And again, we'll talk about that. The second one is that the world is become flat. We have about 4 million students who are studying internationally right now. UNESCO and OECD say that number should probably hit 7 million by about 2020, and yet our numbers are flat in international. For a school like St. FX to have flat enrollment internationally, I really think that we can make an improvement there. And the improvement is not just financial for the institution. I do think, I've had my own experience of 1,400 students back in Ottawa. I think it enriches the learning environment for all students. And at the same time, it takes me back to that first slide, or that first picture to say, but how are we going to ensure that those students are successful here? There's great opportunities internationally, John. I saw John just in, John Gaventa. John, where are you? There you are. And the work that John and his team are doing, we need to leverage that in a different way. I think the Cody is a great Trojan horse for us to go out around the world and identify Antigonish as the place that many of these students want to be to get an education. So that's the second one. A third one that's on my mind is our market is changing, is that for-profits right now, and I don't mean the private institutions, all the Ivies and all the Catholic schools in the States, but the private for-profits are growing exponentially. And not only at an undergraduate level, at a graduate level. I think that those are great institutions for some students because I believe in the power of education, and there are some students, quite frankly, who cannot come to have a St. FX experience. So for them, that's good. But we have to be careful in terms of what percent of those students who would traditionally come here are choosing an alternative way to be educated, and think about what that means for us. It kind of ties into the next one of how does information communication technology, what role does ICT play in higher ed? And it could be online, that's one, that's where our minds often go to very quickly, but it means our nursing faculty and a deeper commitment in simulation where, again, in this short time that I'm on campus, I have to refer back to from where I come. And again, I've had a long, several years of experience around integrating simulation technologies in healthcare, applied health sciences, nursing programs. And I, in fact, am absolutely convinced that it enhances the experience for students. Absolutely convinced. We have sent loads of our faculty down to places like Drexel and Harvard to understand what they're doing around simulated learning. And the idea of sending out a nursing student, and I say this very, very much tongue-in-cheek of a patient on a hospital floor at that particular shift having some type of medical issue is really, really rare. But a simulation environment is extraordinary how that can be recreated for those students. Again, better preparing them. But it requires funds to do it. ICT, I think, can be applied in all disciplines. It just needs us to give some thought to how it can be used to, again, enhance the learning experience for students. And the last one is, although it doesn't keep me up at night as much as these other ones, we do have to be mindful that we are in a different world today. And I know St. FX has realized that over the last several years, so it's stabilized a little bit in the last year. But I don't expect this government or the next one or the next one to be able to bail us out of this. And from all, I have not met with Minister Regan yet, but everything that I've read, that she's said and she's written in print, is I do think this is a minister who's trying to get this turned around and is supportive of the universities in this province. So I'll look forward, as I said, I met with the deputy last week and the minister was away, and I'll look forward to working with her and her team. But we have to think about how are we going to navigate these turbulent waters going forward, and that means doing things slightly differently. Well, I don't know what that even means, but I know status quo just simply can't get us there. So that might be more growth, more enrollment, etc. And we'll work on that again going forward. And the opportunity through the term of discovery efforts will allow you to give me any of those thoughts that might be on your mind. Now, I will say, because Dave is here and Kyler, welcome back, Kyler. What we have realized is not everybody could, particularly our faculty, that just might conflict. Susan and her is trying to put the schedules together, but we just realized that it's not likely to work for everyone, so we're also going to have a virtual town hall. So if those people hear something in the hour together and think, I wish I had said this, or I agree with that comment that I heard, it will allow you to go on and use the virtual town hall for us to capture your comments. Non-attributable, but we'll be able to capture them in the way that reflects your thoughts. So you will hear me, this is my last slide, you'll hear me say this a lot. I read a piece from His Royal Highness Prince Ella Hassam bin Talal of Jordan, who I think is a remarkable visionary in terms of many things, humanitarian causes certainly, but he speaks extremely insightfully, some around the Middle East challenges, but even more globally. And I was asked to represent Canada. Every 10 years, UNESCO has the Future of Higher Education Conference in Paris. And I was blessed to be able to represent Canada and go to that conference in 2009. And so the Prince, in his remarks that led into this conference, said, in every discussion we have about higher education, it's critical that we ask, what does it mean to be educated in the 21st century? And I know the poor faculty at Algonquin just would shake their head every time that I ask this question, but it is a very, very important question, I think, is that the paradox that we face as an academic community today is that I can guarantee that whatever made us successful to today is not likely to be exactly the same things that will have us be successful tomorrow. And so that requires us to have that conversation and ask this question that in every discussion we have about higher education today, we need to ask, what does it truly mean to be educated in the 21st century? And I don't have all those answers, but I've told lots of folks that I go to work every morning with really experienced, really educated, really bright people, and I'm convinced that working together we can see our way through this. My concluding comment here goes back to this book that Bill Bradley wrote, and in terms of an exemplary individual with a remarkable life, Bill Bradley, Rhodes Scholar, MBA All-Star Hall of Famer, American Senator, and he seemed to have lots of things going. And in this book that he wrote in 2012, he uses this analogy, if some of you have read it, about an elevator in his book, That We Can All Do Better. And in it, if you can imagine society, being born in society in the basement. And Bradley would argue that there was a time in North America that if you work really hard, and some of you have heard me say this when I was here on March 21st, that if you work really hard and you get a couple breaks, you could off on the first floor and make a better life. Or if you were born on the second floor of life and worked really hard, had a few breaks, you could go up the elevator and get off on the third or fourth floor. And if you were born into some type of privilege, that you could get off on the top floor. And he would argue that the elevator's broken today. There's lots of evidence, certainly in America, that it's broken. I would argue that the best way to keep the elevator going is for us, again, as an institution, to figure out ways not only to get students to come to St. FX, that's only part one. The more difficult part is to ensure that those students go through to graduation. Because there's lots of evidence that if they don't graduate, that if they go all the way through their career here and are one credit short, that they accrue no greater benefit than a student who has a high school education. That's the power I think that we have as a community, is that we do change people's lives, and I do think that we have the ability to keep that elevator going up and up, not just here in eastern Ontario, northeastern Nova Scotia, but across the country. So with that, I will stop, and I thank you for listening to me ramble. And I would like to just open it up to anything on your mind, any questions, observations, and Susan, we are up on the top floor? Oh, just out here, okay. So happy to answer any questions, and it's lovely to be back at St. FX. Yes? Hey, Jim. Right. Yeah. Right, yeah. Yeah. Right.
It also meant an opportunity for everybody to get a higher education. There were low tuitions. I paid $500 a year, I think.
Yeah.
At the university. My parents didn't have to worry because I could use loans. Grade point average wasn't necessarily a big barrier. Nowadays, there seems to be so much emphasis on when a weak institution here and when a high grade point average, all the students say, we're coming to the university. I'm just wondering about democratization from that point of view too. So
Yeah.
those are two elements of democratization
Yeah.
that I'd like you to maybe.
Sure. So let me start with the internal one. the letter that I sent out on August 1st touched a little bit on this. I hope that some of you, I know it was a bit long, I apologize for that, but there's just, I was away with my wife and I just got carried away in terms of what do I want to share. And one of those was, not only do I believe this is the right thing to do, but the notion of having a flatter organization, to be more open, transparent, slow things down sometimes, ask for people to contribute, shared governance. I still, if of any institution, this will be the first shortly, but of any institution that I've got to know most well, it would be at University of Pennsylvania. It's a pretty good school. And when I speak to faculty there, this notion of shared governance is just, they could not operate otherwise. And I've come to realize, and I've been influenced by a lot of those individuals, that that's just not the right thing to do. It's the way the best schools function, because they get more voices at the table, as opposed to, there's a remarkable thing, some of the deans may experience this. I've experienced it, that some people think they walk into your office and, you know, pixie dust sprinkles from the ceiling and you have all the answers. And the secret is I don't. And so I think if you were to look back in my history, that you would find someone who wants to engage, wants to ask questions, wants to spark, you know, inquiry for people to try to get the best answers. How that will work at St. FX, I'm not quite, like functionally, I'm not sure how that will work, but it's how I think great institutions should function. So that's the internal piece, and I know there's been a lot of things written over the last, particularly 10 or 15 years, of the privatization, the corporatization of higher education. I suppose that's the case. It's just not a world that I'm personally familiar with. And in terms of running like a business, when I hear people talk about, I don't even know what that means. I know that we have this amount of revenue coming in, and we have an insatiable appetite in higher education to spend money. And we do that because we care about the work that we're doing. And so if it means operating like business and we have to balance a budget, I need to bring a balanced budget to the board in the right amount of time. But it will be through dialogue with people like you. And I know that I need some time to just prove that. And I hope I can prove that. So that's the internal side. The external side, it's a complex one. I personalize that question a lot. I can tell you that I was lucky to get into St. FX in 1982. I thought I was doing some pretty neat things in high school, involved in a lot of things, but I was not the highest academic student. And what I've come to realize as an educator is that everything we know about human development should tell us that we're not all ready to perform at university at 18 years old. That sometimes it takes people more time to find their way. And so I've had people ask me, well, why does St. FX have that document that takes so long to fill out and on their application? Why don't they just take marks? I actually like the fact that we have students do that, because I think that we can find those diamonds out there that may not be leading their class, may not have their highest GPA, but we just sense have something else coming for them. So in that regard, I know our admissions offices, it's a tricky answer, because they do want to have, and the faculty want people who can read and write properly and all those things, but it's a fine line. The other part of the democratization is we have had a poor record in Canada of opening up our doors widely to students who are not of privilege, who are minorities, Aboriginal, and you could define minorities in many different ways. And I think as a society we need to figure that out. And disproportionately, just focus on Aboriginal youth, for example, and we know all of the challenges that that community has, that we need to figure out, not just celebrating, as I said earlier, this notion of changing the discussion from access to attainment. And the democratization means, for me, not just allowing people in, but seeing them to get through to the end. What it doesn't mean to me, if I could speak in the negative, is just open up our door as an open access institution. That's not what I mean. We have to, I think, set certain standards. And I mentioned that I'm writing a chapter now for an international book on rankings. I do get worried about how these rankings change the public purpose of universities. That we are changing certain aspects that actually go against why it is that I think we exist. So in other words, driving up GPAs. I mean, some of the criteria that increase your rankings turn away more people. That doesn't align with the way I think we should be operating. And at the same time, trying to find that balance of not being an open educational institution. So those are some of the thoughts that I have on democratization. And as I said in that note on August 1st, massification has occurred here for decades. And other countries are catching up to us now. But I root it in the power and the importance of the work that we do here. That not the hospital sector, not the social service sector, not the other departments. I think higher education is the most important thing to actually have an impact on people's prosperity. So. Okay. Joseph, how are you?
Well, thank you.
Great.
Thank you for your talk. When Mark Wallace was here to lead the discussion about this residential church,
Right.
one of the things that came up several times was, what is our mission statement? We don't actually have one.
Yeah.
I know this is a big question. I'm not expecting an answer
Yeah.
that's crystal clear, but I'm just trying to, as we were talking, I was trying to figure out, are you thinking in your mind that there is a particular kind of mission statement that you want for us? Because we don't actually have one.
Yeah.
And it seems to me that if we don't know what we want to be, we don't know where we're going to go.
Right.
That's sort of, and I know it's a big question, so
Yeah.
I'm not expecting a crystal clear answer, but is there some kind of sense of what it is that you have in your mind for a mission of the university?
That's a difficult question. So I noticed that St. FX doesn't have a mission statement. It doesn't worry me. Harvard and Stanford don't have a mission statement either. They have, their schools do, but they don't. So you can live without a mission statement. The reason, let me just say the reason I think we need one is those two schools I mentioned are not resource scarce. And we are. And so we have to be wise about how we make decisions on where we're going to invest these scarce resources. And to do so, call it mission or purpose, I think you need it to help guide, because once you have your mission and purpose set, mission, by the way, in my view, is not what we do, but why we exist. Why we exist as an organ. That's how I define mission. So once we can agree on that, and that's when we create our strategic plan. So everything lines back up to our mission. So that's how I frame it. And then what I think the mission is, I'm not sure, quite frankly. I have some ideas that I've heard about St. FX on leadership, that this place, something happens when students come here that I'm convinced doesn't happen at least many universities. I'm convinced of it. That are there some things that we could probably do better? Probably. Not probably, of course there are. In any organization there is. But there is something remarkable that I can't actually get my finger on. And look, I've gone here. My son is here. My daughter's still with us. But there is a very neat ethos here. And so that's an element that I think I see, Joseph, in terms of a mission or purpose. I do think that the importance of St. FX to this community is probably even more important, say, than York is to Toronto or Dal is to Halifax. Again, from an economic and social prosperity point of view, I don't think we can ignore from a mission why we exist, that we must have some impact on this region would be another one. And then how we this is where it gets a bit muddier, but how we're preparing students for not just a job, but to contribute to life, civil society, those types of things. There's something in there as well. I would like to know that every student that leaves here goes out, one, that they enjoyed their time at St. FX, but they actually leave being better people to make Canada a better place, or wherever country they come from a better place. How you put that all in words, I'm not sure. But this was not a plant, by the way. I'm really glad you raised it, because, I mean, I talked to our, no, that's right. But I'm glad you asked it, Joseph, because as a team, the deans and vice presidents are here, that what I really expect to come out of the term of discovery is some direction from you to say, let's get the mission sorted out. Let's get on why plan in place. But at the same time, if you're familiar with open space technology, that way to operate meetings and things, I actually prefer that approach, because then the more I define things up front, the more constrained it becomes. But I expect us to figure that out. Yeah. Yes?
Hi. I don't want to reiterate what everybody else has said, so I don't know if you can tell me if this is pointless.
No. Go ahead. Yeah. And what's your name, sir?
Bob Zecker in history.
Oh, hi, Bob.
Yeah. And so a couple times you mentioned that we do have to make a case to the wider community of how we're building prosperity for the province, et cetera. But I would be interested in how to follow up on what you just said, Joseph, how do we make a case for the less quantifiable things? For example, I am also familiar with that certain Ivy League school located somewhere between 34th and 40th Street on Walnut Street, right? But they have, the working school, but they also have people who are doing cutting edge history stuff. But you
Right.
couldn't actually say how that directly leads to an economy, that's prosperous. But I agree with you, it's building a better, it sounds ridiculous, people as citizens, as human beings. So, and I'm worried that in today's society, we're seeing too much emphasis on actual dollar and cents or quantification of the worth of higher ed. And so how would we build a case to with the rest of us that this is in and of itself a worthy project?
Right. Yeah, thank you, Bob. I always try in either writing or speaking to say economic and social prosperity. That the first one is a little bit easier, I think, to quantify, as you say. The second one, not so much. How we measure that will be difficult after people leave, but you would hope that in society, and we have actually seen it in Canada in terms of major crimes are dropping. What role St. FX has on that, I'm not sure. Just the quality of life, some of those metrics, employment rates. I'm convinced that every student who comes here, or almost every student who comes here, unless there's a student that just doesn't need an economic income, do come here with the expectations that they are going to be prepared for employment, whatever it might be. Yeah, so it's a difficult answer to have. I will state that that this notion of universities existing only for business programming, and I'm a benefactor of a business school, is not entering my mind. That great universities are able to have both of those. That they have a great liberal education set of programs, and they have great professional programs. And I'll add, it's not exactly your question, I apologize, but I'll put this out, that although we advertise ourselves as as a undergraduate institution, I would like to have discussions with the faculty about what that means around graduate programs. And I tend to think, and I think of Dartmouth College as just one instance. They are very proud of being a liberal arts undergraduate university, and yet they have one of America's great business schools and a medical school, and on and on and on. So I think that those two things are not incompatible, the same as having a great liberal education series of programs and liberal arts programs are not incompatible with professional programs. How we actually measure that, I bet there's more social scientists in this room that could answer that much better than I could. Maybe, yeah. Thank you for the question. Yeah, good to see you again.
Very short response to that one. Biologically, graduate programs massively enhance undergraduate education.
Right, I would agree.
Going back to a number of things that you said, I teach a big introductory biology class, 300 students first year a year. So by some measures, I teach a quarter of the student population at the same time, or at half time.
Just how big are your classes of the 360?
That's 300 students, two sections of 150.
Okay.
And I would say that one of the biggest barriers to undergraduate democratization with bringing people in with varied backgrounds, mature students, biggest barriers to getting people all the way through
Yeah.
is residence culture.
Okay, talk a bit about that, yeah.
You in residence?
I never lived, no. I mean, I've come from Glasgow, but long story, but something romantic about living in the hotel my grandparents lived. I missed out on the residence culture, yeah, for good or for bad, yeah.
So I mean, maybe you don't know enough about it yet, but I was wondering if you'd like to talk a bit about the views of culture here in the Maritimes in comparison to other places, and what you thought the future of that was.
I'm not, are you talking about the party side of it, or are you talking about male, female? Are you talking about it being a mini academic community itself?
There's plenty of evidence it's not a mini academic.
No, within, say, a floor, you know, that you create mini academic communities is what I...
There's certainly male-female evidence that's lots of problems. That's almost a step of saying it has to be so.
Yeah.
This is more about what is the long-term sustainability and marketability when there is perceived as a private school, and there might have been some deliberate marketing for it. Passive going along with students creating a culture, maybe taking it into not going at the flow of the students.
Right.
I talked to a lot of the students later,
Yeah.
before the years, and a lot of them would have chosen to spend their time here.
Right.
Students themselves are already realizing now, third and fourth year. What are we doing?
Well, I'll tell you that Charmaine is here, I recognize, and I have to honor I'm not sure if Will is here. Is Will here? I saw Will yesterday, but I have to honor the confidentiality of the selection process itself, but I think it's fair to say there, in other conversations with some of those individuals, there was a concern that St. FX may be viewed as a party school. And what do we need to do? And these are all alum as well who've gone on to do great things. On Tuesday last week at our, by the way, SAC is going, I'm changing the name of SAC, okay, to President's Council. Sometimes they're called President's Cabinets, but if you hear me say PC without framing it, that's what I mean. I raised this issue that when we're speaking publicly, I would like us to have conversations about the academic experience that occurs here, not some of the other things. I will be doing some things as a president in my own style, and That means being highly engaged with the students and yet being very, very sensitive to where I draw that line. And I'm just going to leave my comments at that, okay? Because I'll just leave it at that. How we do that within our residences, when I think of a university, I think of a vice president academic provost, and we have Leslie doing a great job over doing this. We've hired, I think, a gem in Andrew here on the finance and admin. There is a group missing here at St. FX. I don't personally know of another university without a vice president student services. And we need to work through these financial challenges that we're having, but at some point you can be assured that I need someone waking up, and I think Bob, where's Bob? I see Bob is taking a tremendous amount of everything else on his plate to oversee this at this point. But I need to know that someone's waking up and every morning thinking just about that. So how we change that culture, it might start with me. There's other things that we could think about. As you know, some houses and other institutions have more faculty involved in them to be able to have more academic-like conversations. On Tuesday, I handed out a book that I think is a great book by George Keller, that the transformation of a small liberal arts college, talking about Ellen or Elon, depending on how you define it, as becoming one of, over 25 years, I think one of America's great universities. And some of the things that they have done, and some of them have been around housing, like having an international house, that having these, when I say these mini academic cultures, what I meant by that is that the houses will talk about, purposefully, about academic issues, not about some other things. So I'm not an expert. In fact, I would turn to St. FX when I was in Ontario to look for expertise around residences. We only held 1,050 students on campus, and did not do nearly as good a job as what happens here. But having that conversation is really important. I'll give you one example of that, is that people have said, well, should residences be operated internally, or should they just outsource them to private organizations? And many places do that, and for different reasons. My position on it is, do we view a residence as a accommodation hotel, or do we think a residence has something to do with the academic experience while a student is on campus? I'm really clear that I'm on the latter. How we get there, look, that's just a great example of when we do a term to discovery. I'd like to hear your views, because I'm sure there's people in the room here who have had their own experience in that environment. Maybe you're one of those. It does concern me, some of the things that I've heard in residences. I'll just, again, leave it at that, and I will try to frame that in my comments on August 31st. I'll try to frame that on my comments at the welcoming Mass. It's on, Janet's not here, is she? Janet, there you are, on the 7th of September, and maybe we could all start to have that conversation with students. Okay. That's not an easy one for me, okay. But it's a good, very important point. I'm actually an introvert, so I find this much easier than going up to the reception, so we can. Any other things? And my email, I'm accessible. Just if I could, I think most of you know that Adam was here last year. Loved St. FX. He's coming in on Friday. And Megan is in her second year now. Our youngest is in grade 12 at Sacred Heart in Ottawa, and going into grade 12. So he's actually living in Ottawa with Mary Ellen for the year. Mary Ellen has a sabbatical after this year. So second year from a family point of view gets much easier. But first year actually, from a selfish point of view, although, let me rephrase that, because I will miss them greatly. But there's some benefits, let me say it that way, and that is that I'll be here early and late and here late at night. So I'm going to take these first year really to do a deep dive on St. FX and again trying to figure out how best to do my job. So if there's other things that you want to talk about outside of these department meetings, and they'll run from really small groups, I think, won't they, Susan? Just like up, like, yeah. Yeah, so we'll break those in half. So it really should be nice to have a good dialogue. And I'm meeting with all of the leaders of the various unions. And as a former chief negotiator for a union, I absolutely respect their important role. And so the questions that we're putting out, David and I are a little bit concerned 5 is too many, but we have 5 crafted. Are those posted to the website now, David, those 5 questions? Yeah, so I'm going to be meeting with the union leadership just to share them with, if there's any union leaders here, just to, do these sound right? Am I going to, isolate people or, and then they're going to be posted. So they will be seen publicly on my website along with other things, including agenda minutes for PC, minutes for PC, so that anytime you want to know, okay, what's going on, that you'll be able to go and read and try to understand what's on our minds. But those 5 questions will be posted. And David, I think we're going to be sending those out as well ahead of time, right? Yeah. So we think those 5 questions will be not provocative, but open-ended enough to gather some good input. So, yes? Right. Brenda, hi. Right. Yeah, yeah. 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 Right. Yeah. Yeah. You're welcome. I'm looking for a question, or can I? There's more of a statement, right? Yeah. Yeah. Well, I would agree with you. Yeah. Yeah, but if I were to have first, let me just, I'm not planning any more residences, okay? Can we just agree with that? Yeah, but when I say international house, because we've got beautiful residences, what I have seen is that those houses, by the way, aren't ghettos for international students. They are for any student who wants to participate and be more aware and live in an even more international area. That's what I meant. Yeah, so, yeah. But, I mean, I've just seen over the years 2 extremes around internationalizing campuses. And when I think internationalization of a campus, I just don't mean bringing international. I mean really allowing, staff and faculty and students to go out to other parts of the world. It's just tremendous what they bring back. But for those students who come here, the 2 extremes are we have 3,000 international students, and 2,800 are all from within 100 miles of Beijing, and they go to this part of the campus. That is not the way I view internationalization. I think we have to be, you have to first of all be prepared to support these students, and I mean, it's very, very different for them, and they've got their own challenges when they land here. Employment is a great, I'm not even sure the Nova Scotia ability for internet. Is it after 1 year? Immediate now? Okay, well that's great, because that's really helpful if they can get employment, and if they don't go to Halifax and stay in Halifax. Then how do you make sure that you have a diversity of those international students and they're truly blended within the group, so that that kid from New Glasgow can actually benefit from that kid from Tanzania and understand, you know, what's different between the two places. Yeah, the easy thing is to attract more international students. Really, that's the easy part. The more hard part is to make sure that it's a great experience for everyone and they enjoy their time here, they're successful, they learn all those things. Yeah. Hi. Yeah.
I wish I had a nice philosophical question for you, but I just have very practical.
Sure, yeah.
What about the presidential task force? How does that fit into
the priorities piece? Yeah. So Leslie's here. So Leslie, let me just have a go at this. I'm sorry, I know some of you have other deadlines, but Leslie is meeting with the 27 members of that group. And then I'm going to have an opportunity to listen to that group. Is that right, Leslie? Is that right? To hear what they have uncovered. I have been down this path before. In fact, we started ours in, I think, 2008, and it's now a Harvard case study that they're using at Harvard. And Harvard sent people up. They want to know how we did it, etc. So I feel somewhat, some level of comfort in this. What I don't know and what I don't want to do is preempt the hard work of that committee. But I know consultation, even at this stage, that would be my experience, is it's important. And so when I meet with that committee, I just want to hear what's on their mind and see the process. Leslie has kept this thing going and kept me informed of where it's at, but I have not had any time to actually meet with the group. So all I can really say is those two things is I'm going to meet with the group of 27, and the message is, I think, just remember earlier I said slowing things down sometimes to make sure that everybody has an opportunity and understand. That will be what will be flowing through my mind when I'm listening. And that might be on their schedule or not. They might not agree with it. If that's the case, that's good. So that's as far as we are. But I do know that a lot of work, these are exhausting processes. And so it has to be brought forward, and I've told the board that I'll be bringing forward a plan once I meet with the committee on, okay, how do you do this next phase on the execution side of the good work that's been done. Okay. You're welcome. It's not a very exciting case study, by the way, but it was fun. Okay, well, thank you so much. I'm going to wander up and appreciate your time.